Thank you for joining us with the news on QTV. My name is Diana Sumbwe. First, we take a look at stories making headlines. Zambia and Angola have abolished visa requirements for citizens traveling between the two countries. The Consumer Unit Trust Society Cuts International has described as retrogressive the introduction of tax on internet-based phone calls. And police in Siavonga district have arrested a 60-year-old man for the murder of his 58-year-old wife using a pounding stick. And now the news in detail. Zambia and Angola have formally waived off the visa requirement for citizens traveling between the two countries. This is a culmination of signing of two visa exemption agreements during a state visit to Zambia in May by Angolan President João Lourenço. The two agreements, one for diplomatic and official passport holders and another for ordinary passport holders, could however not be implemented immediately owing to the clause in the two agreements which makes it mandatory for both parties to fulfill all internal legal formalities and communicate such fulfillments in writing through diplomatic channels. Making the announcement at a media briefing in Lusaka, Acting Home Affairs Minister Michael Katambo explained that the two agreements will come into effect tomorrow, Thursday, 16th August 2018. Mr. Katambo says the agreements will enable citizens from both countries travel without a visa for a period of 30 days and remain in the territory of both countries for a period non-superior of 90 days. He, however, states that the agreement is not applicable to citizens who would like to work, have fixed residence, study, or travel to the two countries for medical purposes. Mr. Katambo says the agreement will deepen the bilateral relations of friendship and cooperation between the two countries and eliminate barriers and promote the movement of nationals from Zambia and Angola.
The two agreements could not be implemented immediately owing to the clause in the two agreements which makes it mandatory for both parties. One, firstly, to fulfill all internal legal formalities, which for Angola includes endorsement of the agreement by Parliament. And secondly, to communicate such fulfillment in writing through diplomatic channels. Distinguished members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to announce that all the legal formalities have now been concluded, and therefore the two agreements will enter into force on the 16th of August 2018. The agreements apply to nationals of the respective countries who hold valid diplomatic, official, and ordinary passports who intend to enter the territory of the other for tourism, family visits, official and private businesses, as well as in transit without a visa. You will recall that the agreements on the visa exemption were not the only ones signed during the state visit, but I can boldly state that they are the most fundamental, as they will act as a catalyst to a bedrock for the successful implementation of all other agreements. This is because goods and services do not move across borders on their own. They are moved by the people, and these two agreements will make it very easy for nationals of both countries to move between the two countries seemingly.
And Angolan ambassador to Zambia, Balina da Silva, says the open border between the two countries is a reflection of the good friendship that exists between them and the good leadership of the presidents of the two countries.
It is important to state that this agreement is not applied to those citizens who would like to work, fix a residence, study, and for medical purposes. The open borders between the two countries is the reflection of the good friendship and leadership of our two head states, namely His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola, and His Excellency Edgar Chagua Lungu.
Consumer Unit Trust Society Cuts International Center Coordinator Chennai Mukumba has described the decision by Cabinet to introduce tax on internet-based phone calls as retrogressive. Ms. Mukumba says this amounts to double charging consumers who will still pay for data in addition to the 30 ngwe per day or 90 kwacha per month. She has told Q News that the decision by government will hurt low-income consumers that had switched to internet-based phone call communication due to the high cost of regular phone calls. She says communication is not a luxury service, but a necessary social and economic activity of citizens that considerably reduce the cost of doing business. Ms. Mukumba has since urged the government to revise the statutory instrument meant to introduce the 30 ngwe per day tariff on internet phone calls and rather focus on ensuring improved service provision by Airtel, MTN and Zamtel. Meanwhile, opposition National Democratic Congress NDC consultant Chishimba Kambwili has urged President Edgar Lungu to consider stepping down if he has failed to run the country. Mr. Kambwili says President Lungu has failed to run the country as evidenced from the number of wrong decisions his government is making, citing the introduction of the 30 ngwe per day tariff on internet-based phone calls. He says the decision by government to introduce a new tax on internet-based phone calls is an indication that it is broke and has no money in the reserves. Mr. Kambwili, who is also Patriotic Front Ron Member of Parliament, says the Zambian people are already overtaxed, questioning the justification of the newly introduced tax on internet-based phone calls. And the Patriots for Economic Progress PEP says it does not make sense for government to introduce an additional tax on internet based on phone calls when the internet bandwidth that is used to make such calls is already heavily taxed. PEP President Sean Tembo has advised the government that the solution to the ever-increasing fiscal deficit does not lie in the introduction of more punitive taxes, but rather in exercising more fiscal discipline by not spending money that is not there. Mr. Tembo adds that if government wants to increase tax revenue collection, the solution does not lie in introducing new taxes, but rather in addressing tax evasion among foreign investors who resist paying their fair share of taxes. He has advised government to consider doubling its budgetary allocation to Zambia Revenue Authority so that the authority can double the number of its personnel and consequently double the tax revenue collected on behalf of government, especially from the mining sector, Chinese and South African companies. Mr. Tembo has reminded government that there is no country in the history of mankind which ever taxed itself to prosperity.
We are very disappointed that the government decided to introduce a tax on internet-based phone calls. This is disappointing to us because the bandwidth, which is basically used to make these internet calls, is already currently taxed by the government. So we don't see any sense in the government introducing an additional tax for the same internet-based call. We do sympathize with the government in terms of the financial problems that it is going through. However, we believe that the solutions to those problems is for government to begin to exercise fiscal discipline by not spending money that they do not have. The president doesn't need to travel to countries like Turkey to go and attend an inauguration ceremony where the citizens of that country have never even heard of a country called Zambia. That is a waste of resources. So those are the areas which the government must address in order to make sure they balance the budget, as opposed to shifting the burden on the poor citizens of this republic.
Vice President Inongewina says public servants are key in spearheading the promotion of peaceful and inclusive societies through the formulation of sound policies, adopting global and continental goals in addressing the needs of the African people. Speaking when she opened the African Association for Public Administration and Management and NIPA training workshop dubbed Promotion, Peaceful and Inclusive Societies, Role of Public Administration and Management, Ms. Winner stressed the importance of peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development in Africa. The Vice President, who was represented by Minister in the Office of the Vice President, Sylvia Chalikosa, reminded participants that the path to a peaceful, prosperous and integrated Africa is not easy, thus the urgent need to ensure that they take the meeting seriously.
It is also gratifying to note that the objective will be translated into interlinked areas which include the following. 1. Transformational leadership and governance. 2. Peace building and conflict resolution. 3. Legal, regulatory, and policy frameworks on inclusiveness. And 4. Public participation and citizen engagement. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I wish to remind you that the path towards a peaceful, prosperous, and integrated Africa is not easy. However, with the training you are undergoing, you are expectant as the people of Africa. We are expectant as the people of Africa that the knowledge and skills you will acquire will give you the abilities to apply transformational leadership or improve public performance and service delivery. I am confident that as senior and middle-level administrators and managers from the public or civil service, local, decentralized, devolved governments, quasi-government institutions, academics, private and civil society, you will diligently serve the people of Africa to the best of your abilities.
And speaking at the same event, African Association of Public Administration and Management General Secretary George Scott said partnership among stakeholders is critical for the development of Africa. Mr. Scott said public servants and all other key stakeholders, being the epicenter of government operations, must be equipped and empowered to foster development on critical areas such as promotion of peaceful and inclusive societies as a prerequisite for development.
APAM has also participated in what we call the World Government Summit organized annually in Dubai by the United Arab Emirates Ministry of Happiness. You see, in some other countries, they have a ministry called Ministry of Happiness. What does it mean for African countries? As part of our strategy, we enhance governance at the grassroots, and APAM is keen to forge lasting collaboration with districts and local governments. That is the level that we are going. That we are liaising with various African countries to see to what extent we can liaise with the district level and local government. The reason is that all of our African countries, we believe that the devolved and decentralized systems are the roots for effective service delivery. For the rest of the year, the key program left with the APAM program, the November this year, the government of Botswana is hosting the APAM 39 Guided Conference in the Botswana. The theme is innovation, resourcefulness, integration, and inclusivity. These are fundamentals of the transformation of governance and public administration in Africa to achieve that the 2060 sustainable development goals.
Meanwhile, National Institute of Public Administration NIPA Executive Director Professor Royson Mukwela said citizens of today desire to thrive in an inclusive, prosperous and peaceful society where leaders foster economic and social development while upholding democracy, rule of law, separation of powers, equity and gender equality.
As public servants, we should not only appreciate our role as a think tank, but also embrace it and do the needful through synergistic relationships. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we at NIPA wish all those participants We wish to thank APA through the Secretary General for choosing and trusting DIPA to host and join to conduct such an important workshop. Once again, we thank the Honorable Minister and also the Vice President for coming despite our busy schedule and giving this training program the high profile that it deserves. As public servants,
the training workshop has drawn participants from across the African continent. Police in Siavonga Southern Province have arrested a 60-year-old man for the murder of his 58-year-old wife using a pounding stick. The suspect has been identified as Bernard Hamwinga of Hakabija village in Chief Sinadambwe's chiefdom in Siavonga district, who murdered his wife, identified as Maggie Mafuta of the same village. Confirming the development to Q News, Siavonga District Commissioner Lavmo Kanyama says the incident took place around 17:30 hours on Sunday, 12th August 2018. He added that the victim's body has since been buried following a post-mortem that was conducted. Mr. Kanyama has strongly advised married men in the district to desist from killing their wives, but instead strive to resolve marital disputes amicably. He notes with concern how Siavonga district of late has continued to record murder, defilement, and gender-based violence cases, with men being the major culprits in most cases. He has since called for the stiff punishment for men involved in murder and gender-based violence cases in order to deter would-be offenders. United Nations Resident Coordinator Janet Rogan has expressed concern over the rising number of HIV-positive adolescents. Ms. Rogan says this shows that a lot of young people are engaging in unprotected sex, which in turn is contributing to early pregnancies, marriages, and school dropouts. She notes that HIV remains a social problem that calls for concerted efforts from all stakeholders to fight. Ms. Rogan says the fight against HIV should be intensified if the 90 to 90 to 90 target is to be achieved by 2020. The 90 to 90 to 90 is a joint United Nations program on HIV/AIDS which aims at diagnosing 90% of all HIV-positive persons, provide antiretroviral therapy, ART, for 90% those diagnosed, and achieve viral suppression for 90% of those treated by 2020. Ms. Rogan is, however, happy that the Zambian government has made strides towards the fight against the pandemic.
I think the statistics nationally still stand at around 13%, which is actually, there is a gender difference in that. In some areas, the percentage for women living with HIV is as high as 15%, and sometimes for men it's as low as 11%. What is slightly worrying, though, is in our younger people, the adolescent, youth particularly, the numbers are somewhat on the rise, especially for adolescent girls. And that is an indication that there is a lot of early sexual debut happening, unprotected sex happening, which is also leading to early pregnancies and those problems we find of going into early marriages or leaving school. HIV/AIDS now and tackling it is a social issue. It requires us all to be working together. It's not only for government, it's not only for the parents in the household, it's for the children, it's for the chiefs who are great partners in the fight against HIV/AIDS and child marriage, and for everybody who is working in this area. We can't give up. There is a target globally of 90-90-90 by 2020. That's only in a few years' time. I think this.
Senior citizen Dante Sanders has warned of increased poverty in Zambia if any sanctions are imposed on the country as a result of the deportation of Zimbabwean politician Tendai Biti. Mr. Sanders says sanctions on a developing country like Zambia are most likely to hurt the poor the most. He tells Q News that the United States and the European Union should therefore consider other means of expressing their displeasure over the deportation of Mr. Biti. Mr. Saunders is urging the United States and the European Union to instead help Zambia recover public monies that have been stolen and hidden away in offshore bank accounts. He says the United States and European Union will do more good to the people of Zambia if they help them recover all such public funds from those who have plundered the country.
That rather than putting what I call sanctions on the Zambia, which will only continue to hurt the poor people even further, I appeal to them rather to try to help not only Zambia but Africa as a whole recover all the stolen money that has been stolen from our country and hidden in banks within Europe and America and even in China. They should rather help the people of Zambia recover these funds from those people who have amassed wealth, who have plundered this nation. Bring back our money, and you will be doing more good for the people of Zambia, rather than to apply sanctions which will only go again to hurt us even more. It will never hurt those top people at the top who have mismanaged our country. It will never help to them. They can go shopping anywhere. They can go to hospitals anywhere.
And People's Alliance for Change PAC President Anford Banda says the threat by the United States to review its bilateral ties with Zambia following the sending back of Zimbabwe's opposition leader Tendai Biti should not be taken lightly. Mr. Banda says Zambia cannot afford to strain its relationship with the United States government. He states that Zambia should deal with any potential threat to its bilateral ties with the United States, considering that it's one of the donor countries that provide support to the country, especially in the health sector. Mr. Banda notes that ordinary Zambians are the ones who will suffer the consequences of any damage in relations with the United States. He has since implored the government to seek audience with the United States government in order to amicably resolve the matter.
We, as a country, I'm sure we receive a lot of aid from America. In as much as we don't encourage aid, as a long-term solution, but I think it's not something that, we can say that we don't need now. I think we still need aid, looking at the fact that, the country is in a crisis. So what would advise the government as PAC is that I think they need to mend their relationships with the American government, and they need to at least, do damage control. Otherwise, being arrogant, won't help them. It won't help the country. It will hurt a lot of people. You find that maybe there won't be medicines in hospitals and other, essential, issues that we benefit from America. I think so. Please, let's go back there and talk to them, and get our relationship back to good terms.
Federation of Free Trade Unions of Zambia, FFTUZ President Chingati Msiska has described as unjustified impromptu visits by Lusaka Province Minister Bowman Lusambo to government departments to check on workers in reporting for work late. Mr. Msiska says government departments have inspectors as well as heads of departments whose duty is to monitor the conduct of civil servants. He wonders why the provincial minister should stoop so low by performing the duties of junior officers such as the labor inspectors. Mr. Msiska has since encouraged the provincial minister to follow the laid down procedures and consider delegating officers from line ministries to be ensuring that civil servants in the province report for work on time.
We are wondering as to what is happening now to this head of this parasector or civil service. We have permanent secretaries all over. If we look at institutions which have been visited so far, the permanent secretaries were supposed to be doing their jobs. He is on record, yes, the Honorable Minister, where he mentioned that the permanent secretary are working in collaboration with him. Yes, that is the way to go, but it doesn't need to take the whole minister to be going around these institutions. We have inspectors, at the Ministry of Labor. We have directors in these institutions. We have all those civil servants who, unless maybe the government today is telling us even the directors and the permanent secretaries are coming late. I mean, that is another issue. But we have also guidelines. We should follow the laws, the laid down procedures. There is no way the minister himself should take it up upon himself to go around and visiting, to check who is coming late and who's coming early. You know, it's too much for the minister. So we want to urge and we want to put a demand on the minister. I think that it's better he did some kind of delegated authority. Let him delegate these kind of duties to the lower officials and the people, the proper officers that are going to make this visit, not only visit, but who are going to make sure that people are not coming late for it. But this culture, I think we can't have it in Zambia, especially the Zambia of now. We are one.
Young African Leadership Initiative YADI President Andrew Tetwe has charged that the leadership of the opposition United Party for National Development is illegally in office. Mr. Tetwe says this because the UPND has since 2006 not held any convention to renew the mandate of the party leadership. He states that the failure by the UPND to hold a convention is an indication that the party has not embraced democratic tenets. Mr. Tetwe says the UPND must not expect YALI and other stakeholders to remain mute on the matter because they have a duty to protect the Republican Constitution. Mr. Tetwe states that the Constitution clearly stipulates that all political parties should hold periodic elections, thus the need for all political parties to ensure they hold inter-party elections to allow party members elect their preferred candidates.
And what has caused this intimidation on YALI, what has caused them calling on YALI, is our desire to protect the Republican Constitution. And we have said time and again, UPND and its leadership right now are existing illegally. And the reason why they're existing illegally is because they have not gone to any election since 2006. Hakainde has been at the top of UPND for 12 solid years without being challenged, without going to any intra-party elections. And so for us, we are very concerned because the dwindling fortunes of UPND are a direct result of the fact that the party has not embraced democratic tenets. We therefore want to call on them once again to say, can you go to our convention? And don't tell us we don't have a right to speak about these issues, because it is our right to protect the Republican Constitution. And we shall protect Article 60. The Constitution is very clear that a political party must go for regular elections. So we call on UPND once again, go to a convention. What is it that HH is so afraid of that he does not want to be subjected to an elective convention? We get surprised. Why is it that the entire UPND leadership is so afraid? They want to be appointed, to be pointing at each other to take up leadership position. That is not the way it is.
But United Party for National Development UPND Deputy Secretary General Patrick Mucheleka has described as malicious YALI's assertions, which should not be taken seriously. Mr. Mucheleka says Mr. Ntewewe is merely a Patriotic Front vuvuzela who is parroting the Wako ni Wako agenda. The United Party for National Development Kanyama Constituency Executive Committee, led by Constituency Chairman Golden Choka, has defected to the ruling Patriotic Front. Welcoming the 7 defectors to the ruling party, Lusaka District Chairman Stafford Kayame said there was still enough room in the boat, and Mr. Choka, who spoke on behalf of other defectors, said their decision to leave the UPND was arrived at after witnessing the development the Patriotic Front has taken to Kanyama and other parts of Lusaka. He also bemoaned the lack of a clear vision in the United Party for National Development under the leadership of Party President Hakainde Hichilema. But United Party for National Development Lusaka Province Youth Wing spokesperson Otis Bwalia says the continued defection of some members to the Patriotic Front has not shaken the party. Mr. Bwalia says the defections are temporary, stressing that those defecting will in the near future rejoin the party. He says the people defecting, who are mostly youths and doing so in order to have little money for their pockets, which is not sustainable for improving their living standards. Mr. Wadia has advised the ruling party not to get excited with the defections, stating that the defectors will soon rejoin the opposition party.
These defections are not going to change the position of the party and are not going to change even the support base of the party that we are enjoying so far as UPND. These are just cosmetic defections which won't change even the economic situation in this country. Actually, what PF should be concerned about is what is happening to this economy. And even those that are seemingly defecting, of which we know that they will go for just a few days and they will come back to UPND where they belong. They are going to PF simply because they want to probably buy a bag of meme, to bag a packet of sugar and all that. But that is not sustainable. That is not sustainable. They will soon come back to UPND where they belong. What they should be looking at today is what is it that is actually going to improve their living standard? What is it that is going to benefit their children and their families? Is that defection going to benefit them or their families? The answer is no. This defection.
Speaker of the National Assembly Patrick Matibini is happy with the progress made by SADC countries in trying to transform the SADC Parliamentary Forum into a regional parliament. Dr. Matibini says the transformation of the Parliamentary Forum into a regional parliament will enhance democracy at regional and continent levels through enactment of standard model laws, which are expected to be domesticated international laws by member states. Speaking in Pretoria, South Africa, after speakers of national assemblies from different SADC countries held transformation consultations with SADC chairperson, who is also Southern African President Cyril Ramaphosa, Dr. Matibini said the progress made so far towards the formulation of a regional parliament was a culmination of Zambia's long-standing efforts of ensuring regional economic and democratic integration. Dr. Matibini said Zambia will continue being in the forefront of ensuring that the Parliamentary Forum was transformed, as the country was one of the pioneers of democracy in Africa and the SADC region. He added that the SADC Regional Parliament will serve as a vehicle for enhanced democracy in the region once established, as it will set up minimum standards of model laws. This is contained in a statement issued by Naomi Nyawali, First Secretary Press and Public Relations at the Zambia's High Commission to South Africa. The Barotse National Freedom Alliance, BNFA, says development activist Canisius Banda is being reckless and insensitive by suggesting that people calling for secession of Western Province should be arrested. BNFA National Trustee William Harrington has told Q News in a walk-in interview that as far as the BNFA is concerned, there is no one calling for the secession of Barotseland. He states that by asking President Edgar Lungu to arrest all those calling for the secession of Barotseland, Dr. Banda is ill-advising the head of state. Mr. Harrington says this is besides displaying his total ignorance about the abrogation of the Barotseland Agreement of 1964. He says the resolution of the Barotse National Council of 2012 was that Barotseland reverts to its pre-1964 status as a self-administering state as a right. Mr. Harrington says this is the same right that is also recognized by the African Commission for the Peoples and Human Rights, to which Zambia is a member.
I'm therefore challenging my friend Dr. Canisius Banda to come out clearly as to whom he would like to see arrested by President Lungu over the Barotseland issue. Is it Dr. Kenneth Kaunda who broke the Barotseland Agreement of 1964? Is it the over 3,000 delegates to the Barotse National Council of March 2012? Is it the Litunga of Barotseland, Imwiko II, and his entire Barotse royal establishment? who not only attended the BNC of March 2012, but are also party to the Barroso National Council resolutions? Is it the many chiefs such as Chief Inyambo of Mwandi and the many other sub-chiefs from around Barrosoland who Dr. Canisius Banda would like to see arrested by President Lungu? Having asked Dr. Canisius Banda these pertinent questions, I am challenging him to a public debate at any time and at any place of his choice so that we can educate each other about the Barrosoland issue. The
Non-Governmental Gender Organizations Coordinating Council, NGOCC, has received a grant of 40 million Swedish krona, equivalent to about 4.3 million United States dollars or 44 million kwacha, from the Swedish Embassy in Lusaka to support the implementation of the 2018 to 2022 strategic plan dubbed Building Solidarity for Women in Empowerment. Speaking during the grant signing ceremony, NGOCC Board Chairperson Sarah Longwe said the strategic plans will focus on women's empowerment, sexual reproductive health, rights of women and girls, governance and women's leadership, as well as climate change mitigation and resilience. Ms. Longwe said the NGOCC believes in human capital as a critical asset that must be coordinated to deliver on the aspiration of the organization, which is being a vibrant, well-positioned coordinating organization promoting gender equality and women's empowerment in Zambia. She says the support from the Swedish Embassy will go a long way in addressing the suffering of women and girls and in promoting greater gender equality.
The importance of women's empowerment for sustainable development cannot be overemphasized. Of the 1 billion people that are poor worldwide, women make up the majority and are more excluded than men in many aspects. This has been attributed to, among other factors, the fact that women face greater burdens of unpaid work, have fewer assets and productive resources than men, and are more exposed to gender-based violence and are more likely to be forced into early marriage. And economically, women around the world still face a huge persistent of gender gaps.
Speaking at the signing ceremony, Swedish Embassy Deputy Head of Mission Karin Sverken said the signing of the grant agreement is in line with Sweden's feminist foreign policy, whose fundamental aim is equality between women and men. She said for Sweden, gender equality in itself is not an end, but a precondition for achievement of all development aspirations. Ms. Verken notes that while much has been done towards achieving gender equality in Zambia, the country continues to lag behind and has one of the highest levels of gender and other inequalities.
We are trying to mainstream gender equality in all the operations we are supporting in Zambia, but obviously then we also do strategic intervention, and I think we see now the partnership with NGOCC as a very important part in our portfolio, in Zambia. And obviously NGOCC's work for gender equality is clear in line with this, also with the Sustainable Development Goals, and also obviously Zambia's 7th National Development Plan. Yes, we all know again then that we won't reach these goals if women and girls are left behind. And while much has been done towards attaining gender equality in Zambia, we know that Zambia continues to lag behind and actually has one of the highest levels of gender inequality and also inequalities in general. We are trying to...
To end the news, we take a look at stories making headlines once again. Zambia and Angola have abolished visa requirements for citizens traveling between the two countries. The Consumer Unit Trust Society Cuts International has described as retrogressive the introduction of a tax on internet-based phone calls. And police in Siavonga district have arrested a 60-year-old man for the murder of his 58-year-old wife using a pounding stick. On that note, we come to the end of our news. From me, Diana Sumbwe, thank you for watching.